What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 389 of Opinions May Vary. I'm your host, JR. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Alex.
Hi.
This lovely man across the table from me. It's been too long. I missed you, but we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, try not to get too emotional. But very excited for this week's episode, myself in particular. Joining us this week is the creator, the artist, the writer, pretty much everything of Head Lopper, is Andrew MacLean. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is, I'm trying not to overstate, like how rad this is, at least for me. I've been a big fan of Head Lopper for a while now. I was one of the people who found out about it through pure, like, happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the local comic shop on a Wednesday, browsing the racks, and like I remember it had just so happened to be the first issue of Head Lopper had like just hit the stands that day, and I remember thinking, what is this? Because like it's a title that gets you like, Head Lopper sounds cool. I'm in. You have my attention. And then like you pick up the book and it's just this mammoth. Like it's a compared to your average, 22 page or something like that, comic book, like it is a beast. And like flipping through, I was like, okay, yeah, this is mine. I own this now. This is my book. And the rest it goes on from there. I remember I think I tweeted about it back when I actively tweeted to be like, look at how enormous this is. But it's one of the most unique, and like, because not a lot of books really do the kind of quarterly thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure we're going to talk about all that soon. But this is my 2-minute version way of saying you have a really cool book, and I think that's rad.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm glad you took a chance on it on issue 1. I mean, that's the dream, that you hope you can grab someone's attention, just by happenstance. So I'm glad it worked out.
As far as like the genesis of now that first issue that came out, God, what year was that? Was it like
I think it was 2015, like late 2015.
Right, and that Head Lopper had existed before then, correct?
Yeah, it was this kind of passion project of mine that I had self-published 2 issues of. So there's probably, going into working with Image, I think there was probably 65 pages of content or so. And that's why all the issues are kind of like chunky issues, but issue 1 was like, I think it was literally like you couldn't add another page, or a staple couldn't hold it, or something like that. It was like 92 pages, somewhere around 100 pages for just an issue 1. Just because I was like, if anyone's read the self-published stuff, I don't want them to, buy a comic and be like, all right, I already have all this stuff. So we're like, let's just make it stupid big. So it was really big.
What I remember, one of JR's stories, having met you at a convention, was that he was getting his stuff signed, and the comment was it number 2 or number 1?
It was number 1.
Where they go, oh, you have this?
Yeah.
Like, and realizing this is rare to get now.
There was like a weird scenario too, where it came out, and we got word that it had sold out, and then right before we were going to reprint another one, they're like, oh, you know what? Like, there was a whole missing pallet of books in a warehouse. We're going to look for that pallet. And then they spent like a week or 2 looking for it and delayed a reprint. And then they found the pallet, and they're like, all right, we're just going to sell the pallet. So like so we never did a reprint in the end. So like, it was something that, some stores were having a hard time keeping in stock. So like issue 1 was really there wasn't a whole lot of them.
Huh.
Is that like, I imagine it's always the dream, when you're releasing, especially something self-published, to be like, oh, we sold out. We need more of them, potentially a second printing. Was that something that was kind of like holy shit, or was it always, more of my book is top tier, I know this is gonna do great? Like, is that what was that like for you with that happening?
When I first did the very first 23-page self-published thing. I did it for fun. I just said, if I only ever drew these 23 pages, I'm going to make them something that's fun to read, that you don't say, oh, I need an issue 2. That I just thought hey, I'm going to come out the gate and do something fun in case nothing ever happens of this. And I really certainly didn't expect anything to happen of it. So it was, along the way, it was a total shock. So when issue 1 actually came out from Image, I was shocked when they said that, people were picking it up. Losing a pallet on your issue 1 is is really terrible.
Yeah.
But I was so shocked and surprised and excited just to have a book out through Image, something that I thought I would never, draw any more than 22 pages of. I didn't keep me frustrated for very long.
Which, one of the reasons we're talking is because Volume 3 comes out on September 18th. And I had tried getting in touch a couple months ago because you were making an appearance at a local comic shop in East Hampton at Comics and More.
Yeah. And
I had emailed and I was like, can we get a chat before you show up at the shop? And you were like, I'm kind of swamped. Can we do this later? And I was like, of course. we're just a couple of goofballs that make a podcast, and you actually have a real job. So we will cater to your schedule. And so here we are. And
I was in crunch time for the end of Volume 3 at that point. I was
really?
Geez. Yeah. It was getting down to the wire at that point.
What does that take to you already have your issues done? You have the 4 issues, you're going to put them into a trade. What extra work does that entail? Jared showed me the back of the book has sketches and pinups and prelims and stuff like that. So what are you doing on your end for that?
Well, a fair bit. Much like how we mentioned that issue 1 was really heavily front loaded. I know that there are some, collector types. They'll buy each cover, all the variants and stuff. There's people who are these completist collectors. Uh-huh. And at the very beginning, those were the only types of people who were kind of reading Head Lopper, or that's how it seemed. So early on, I kind of just felt like I never wanted to put out a product that didn't have anything new for those people who just buy every version of Head Lopper that comes out. Mm-hmm. So for the trades that come out, I wanted to have something more than just a collection. So I do a new cover, and I do all kinds of interior art for it. And I do generally it's something extra in the back, some more stories, an epilogue, some jokes, something like that. So I think for this issue, I might have drawn, apart from just the extra material stuff, I think I drew another, might have been 16 or 17 pages just for the trade. Just because, I don't know, that was a tradition I started earlier, is not to put out something kind of that doesn't have anything new. And so I've just kind of kept that since then.
One thing I will, and this is going to be the most boring thing that I comment on, but it's something that I point out to everyone, because I have... it's turned into a New York Comic-Con tradition for me, in that it's New York Comic-Con, I need to pick up the latest trade of Head Lopper because I like having things. I'm an idiot and I buy something in floppy and then I also buy it in trade because you can never have it too many times apparently. And but it's become a little bit of a tradition to pick up the latest trade from you at New York Comic-Con. Hopefully, are you going to be there this year? Are you going to New York?
Yeah, I'll be there. New York is so much fun. It's so big and so exciting. I try not to miss them if I can avoid it.
Excellent. So I can continue my tradition.
Yeah, sure.
But one thing that I really dig, because when I show off my stupid signatures and my little sketches and stuff to my friends, I always point out in your books specifically how there's just a little bit extra oomph of quality. The interior, what do you call this? The inside cover?
Yeah.
Or what, the pattern and the design that you put in there? Love it. It's chef's kiss. It's beautiful because most of the time you open that and it's just white. It's just a white inside cover.
Or it's an ad.
Or something, but it's like the Argyle type design. Love it. Please don't ever stop.
Well, I feel like I can't because I've created a new. Well, that's exactly it. I've created a new pattern and a new kind of like scheme for every volume. So every time it comes around, I'm like, all right, I gotta collect some things I can draw like on Argyle.
Which I don't know. Oh, actually, we're gonna get into that later. Never mind. Continue, Alex. Save me.
Having done the research that I was looking through, I'm not normally a Twitter guy, but I was like, I need to find out more. And looking at your Twitter, what I really enjoyed was you're not just posting your own stuff. What I see a lot of is art appreciation. And there was one, it's like, look at this manga. This is an older manga, and the cross hatching is amazing, and there's no outlines. And just like seeing what you appreciate helps me see how you approach your artwork, and that's really cool to do. I don't always see like people have something to sell. You're only seeing what they're selling. You don't see what they're also appreciating.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most of the stuff that I have kind of fallen in love with has come from other recommendations or just being like, I've heard about, this creator a number of times. There might be something to it. And then, I've just tracked it down that way in I don't know. So I'm like, well, I might as well share some of that positivity that I've like benefited from, if I didn't hear a zillion people talking about, this Jack Kirby king of comics, I never would have been, digging into, Kirby comics, old comics, if I didn't hear about this legend and be like, all right, let's see what it's all about.
I am interested to kind of get into, and this, I apologize if this is the most frequently asked question that you get, because you have arguably one of the most unique styles in like, mass-produced comics, however you want to put it. And one thing that I dig is that, it's unapologetic. It's that is your style. When I see you do sketching, when I see you do, like at a convention, like people will post, I got this pick this up, or when you post it, I made this, drew this for a customer, whatever. It's always in your style. It's never like an attempt to be someone else. It's not like the copy paste where you see a lot of like the muscly strong arm guys, It's always your unique style. So I'm interested to hear about like how this style came about. Like, have you ever struggled with people being like, your stuff is good, but maybe if you just kind of conform to the rest of comics, maybe we can work, or something like that. Like, have you had any experience with that?
I mean, I definitely would say that, especially earlier on, my work did look much more like other artists. It's only like over time that you can kind of, it's not so much that you come up with new ideas, but you just, for me anyways, I just blend more and more ideas into it, so it'll feel unique. But early on, I wanted to be Mike Mignola. Like I wanted to, like I couldn't imagine wanting to draw any other way because it seemed so unique and so exciting to me. And but it was also great, like reading about him a little bit and be like, well, his style, is coming from this place of being like Frazetta meets Kirby meets blah blah blah. So like, it's like only unique in that it's maybe a combination of ideas we haven't seen together, before or whatever. But I think everyone starts in that place where you just like, you have to like, copy your heroes or whatever, or you just, but I don't really have a problem where people are like, oh, you should draw more like traditional comics or whatever, or like house styles or something. Mm-hmm. I think generally my art style is usually what grabs someone first. And I mean, I'm grateful for that. Like I said, when I did the initial Head Lopper stuff for all my initial work, I really wanted to work in comics, but it just seemed so far-fetched to me because I knew the way that I wanted to draw was not going to be, I didn't want to draw in a way that was like your typical house style or whatever, because I loved artists like Mike Mignola or, some other more, expressive artists or, oddball artists. So I'm shocked. I never thought that I would, be able to work the way I am. So luckily it's become, over time, the fact that my art looks a little different has become kind of like strength rather than my weakness, which I can't do anything but just be grateful for that, I guess.
It's one of those things that I'll say, it's eye catching at first, and then it takes time to really appreciate. Because, to bear with me for a brief second, to look at it quickly, I might say, "Oh, that's a simple style." But then when I really look at it, I was like, "Look at that cross hatching. Look at
This is not simple.
look at how these shadows lay down. Look at how each character might have their own style, or they're laid out their own specific way." And one of the things I believe I read, Michael Avon Oeming had said, like, it's almost more difficult to bring it down to simpler lines sometimes than it is to like draw the same big muscly costumes all the time, because he's out there drawing like not very complex lines for powers, but I love the look of powers. And and I find that like a good similarity here, whereas like the more I look into it, I was like, this looks hard. And I just, well, Jar's showing me one of the pinups in volume 2.
Volume
right?
1.
Is that one?
Yep.
And he's like, well, here's a Magnolia pinup. And then I looked at it and I was like, the colors look like something else. And I realized that was an Oeming. That's why I picked it
Right
up.
next to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. What was the question? I got lost when you were looking at the pinups.
Yeah, that's one of our strengths is not actually asking a question, is just making a statement and then hoping for a response.
That's fair. I do think that drawing on a simple style can be often more difficult. It's more so. I think it's more so because you don't have as many lines to kind of distract you away from the lines that are actually kind of matter, the lines that are creating the kind of structure, the composition. So you can kind of distract from a bunch of flair and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I always found that I liked my drawings better when they were a little on the simpler side. The more I started to busy them up, the less I felt like I was doing a good job. And partially that was just true. I didn't have quite the skill set at the time to kind of like be able to visualize my drawings in kind of a 3D space or whatever. So for me, I got simpler and simpler. Because I really liked simple artists and everything, but I also just was personally more satisfied when I drew simpler. I would get to a place where I'm just like, if I take this any further, I'm gonna start messing it up, So I was like, I liked the kind of clean look. But yeah, and I do think that, especially when you're in your younger, formative years as an artist, it might be in your best interest to kind of draw simple so that you force yourself to kind of like recognize the most important lines of a drawing before you start covering them up and getting flashy.
Volume 2, just the way you've designed the character. Is that the Destroyer? No.
Oh, Berserker?
Berserker.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
I'm like, that's not the Destroyer. Just like the design of that character, and you could show me just like a silhouette of part of it. It's like, I know who that is. Because like the times like it'll be like, it's like an ominous off, a panel of just silhouette, just shadow. And it really lends to like giving a tone of like what this is and if the character is dangerous or not, kind of thing. And I appreciate like that's a question. What kind of process goes into like your character design to decide like, well, this one will have smooth lines, this one will be more jagged, this one will be like just a combination of a bunch of things, and that'll be creepy. So how do you decide to design your characters in specific manners?
I'll usually start with kind of a basic idea. I'll have an idea like I want this a heavily armored character, or I'll have like a little bit of a vision in my head of where I'm gonna start out. I don't start from just scratch and be like, maybe I found something kind of cool looking. So for like Berserker, I was like, I want there to be. Berserker was a little bit of an exception, but generally I'd think like I want a character that has XYZ because I want them for such and such a purpose, or they fit for whatever reason. And usually my first idea is not great, or it's not quite there. It's sometimes what you think in your head doesn't quite look as good once you see it on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I start just kind of pushing around the shapes from that starting place until one by one little pieces will click or whatever. But Berserker was a little bit different. Berserker was one of the earlier characters that I designed for Volume 2, and I went into it kind of thinking to myself, like, I'm going to design a character that I like, and if it doesn't fit, I'm going to follow the idea to its end, and if it doesn't fit the kind of Head Lopper universe, I won't hold it against me. It can go elsewhere or whatever. So I started out and I had this idea of this suit of armor, and I wasn't sure if it would even fit in a fantasy realm, but I specifically wanted like the head to be just a more abstract shape. I wanted it to be this suit of armor that probably can't even be built in real life. So it's just like, I don't even know if I can call it a suit of armor until I figure it out. But yeah, so, and the other thing was like, I was thinking of, because I love toys and toy design, I was thinking like, hey, what would be a cool toy to own? And I'll just design a toy. And I won't say to myself, it has to be Head Lopper. I'm like, let me just get this idea out. And so when I got the idea out, I was like, no, I think I can really, use this in Head Lopper after all. And then that ended up being the Berserker design.
That brings me to a perfect segue, if you will. One thing that I definitely wanted to touch on, unless you wanted to continue. Okay, cool. I wanted to talk. We have a good friend. We consider him a friend. I don't know if he considers us a friend, but we've had the pleasure of chatting with Israel Skelton of Skelton Crew multiple times in the past, both on the show and then also at conventions. One of the nicest dudes we've had the pleasure of meeting, and you've been able to work with him on some Head Lopper merchandise.
Israel's the man. I love that guy.
He's just and like he's like somewhat local. He's up in Maine, so like he's near the both of us. He's just a great guy.
Yeah, he's so cool.
Because there was the Head Lopper like vinyl figures. There was like the regular one, and then the one that I have, the bog blue variant, and then there's also the glow in the dark. Is there also a blank one? There?
Yeah, there's a short run of like a blank white one, mostly for I think we just figured for people who want to paint their own.
Right.
And did you do like a custom blood splatter one too? I think I recall.
Yes,
I did a handful of them. Yeah, there was I can't remember how many I did, but I hand painted something. I want to say it was probably maybe 10 or so. I hand painted like blood splatter ones. Each one was I tried to make each one unique, which eventually I was just like, how many different patterns can I come up with for blood splatter?
That was one of those things where it's because was that last year? Was that last holiday ish?
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it was probably around holiday season last year.
Where it's the saying, I have a mighty need, where but luckily luckily I say, but I believe they sold out very quickly, so I didn't even have the opportunity to spend a lot of money. But
and there's also the Agatha plushie head too.
Yes, yep.
which somehow, like, as I said, I'm late to the party, reading the books and seeing the shape of the head that Norgal carries around, and then seeing the plushie that Israel's made, I was like, the shape is perfect.
Yeah.
This looks exactly the way it should somehow.
Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we could actually pull it off as a kind of like a stuffed animal type thing, and actually have the right shapes and everything. But I think we got a prototype, and there was like one or two small edits. They really just like nailed it right away. And I was like, all right, I guess you could kind of do anything. I also thought it was going to be like a tiny, like maybe the size of your fist, like at biggest. And then the prototype shows up, and it's almost the size of an actual head. Jesus.
That sounds like Israel.
Yeah,
he seems to. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's true. He does really like the idea of making like replicas and things. Like he wants to get as close to scale as he can.
He cracked I want to say cracked the joke, but it wasn't a joke, where he's like, if anyone ever commissioned him to make the key to the Fortress of Solitude, they will need a flatbed trailer.
Now, with working with Israel, I remember that when the original figures, there's also pins. I forgot about the pins. God, Israel is a machine. With the original like figures, I remember seeing like, oh hey, I'm pretty pumped for that. That's a sale. And then like there was a picture of like Israel holding it just like by the leg, just like so you see like fist, and it gives you scale, and it's like, oh shit, this thing is big. This is a beefy boy. And like I remember getting it, and it's very like it's. Do you have like are you a fan of like the vinyl figure, the vinyl toy scene? Whether it's kaiju and all that stuff. I actually went to my first vinyl toy show so I'm well versed in the fact that people call them kaiju sometimes.
The monsters.
Yep. But do you have a background in that? Is that where the idea, for coming up with the Head Lopper, figure was, or is that just I want a big ass figure of Head Lopper?
No, yeah, that's exactly where it came from. Yeah, I've got a bunch of vinyl figures, designer stuff, and kaiju things, and that's exactly it. Yeah, a lot of them, the kind of like standard size for soft vinyl toys seems to be around 8 inches or so. And so when Israel was kind of like, hey, we'd love to make X, Y, and Z. If you could make anything you want, what would it be? I was just like, I mean, it was a no-brainer for me. I was like, I want an 8-inch soft vinyl Norgal. Like that was exactly what I wanted. And obviously even when I was drawing, I was like, oh, he's gonna be pretty wide. Like this is gonna be a pretty big toy. And then I was still shocked again when it came up, not how tall it was, but just how thick it was. It felt like I was holding like a football or something because he's so beefy.
Was that a situation where who approached who first? Like, did he come after you and say, I like your book and I want to make a thing? Or were you looking for someone to make merch for you?
Actually, it was really funny. I was at a Boston Con, and my friend Jeff Martin knows everybody. He's just really talkative and really, really friendly and everything. And so, of course, I had known him for a while, and Israel had known him for a while. And he had been over at this Boston Con. He had been over at Israel's booth, and he was just like, hey, you know who you should make something with? Andrew MacLean and his comic Head Lopper. And Israel was like, hey, that's a great idea. And then Jeff walked over to my booth and he was like, hey, you know who you should make something with? And like, I think by the end of the show, Israel came over. He's like, hey, I think we should make something. I was like, I agree. Like, it was just that simple. And it's worked out great. Like, it's been a really fun partnership.
That's rad. It's
just, yeah, it's like I'm a proud parent of people who didn't even know that I existed 5 minutes ago. But I will say it's a great product. Like the finished result, it's beautiful on the bookshelf. It's one of the only things that I've ever like. I remember I used to marvel at Alex's ability to get things signed, whether it was a comic or an actual thing. Like I remember, it's why do you have a piece of wood in your backpack? Oh, well, this is the base to my replica gun from Firefly, and I'm getting it signed, and it like, in my head I'm like, so much, who cares, dude? And now I see it every time I come over, and I get really jealous and sad that I don't think of these type of things. So one of the few things that I have signed that isn't a comic book or like a trade or a hardcover is actually the Norgal that I have. One because it's so big you can sign it. But it's just, and it's also like another thing that, like, I don't know if this was intentional in the design, was despite the fact that he's enormous, it's very light. So hauling it to New York wasn't a problem. Like, it was, it's great for displaying. It's great for sign. Just buy yourself a Norgal figure. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's the kind of the nature of soft vinyl toys, is that the vinyl itself isn't that thick. So it's really, really soft, and it's really, really cool material. And you can, if you're into vinyl toys or whatever, you can hit them with a with like a blow dryer, and the heat just from a blow dryer makes them really malleable. So you can like pull them apart and everything, and without damaging anything. The soft vinyl toys, I don't know how they figure out how to make these things, but they're pretty clever.
Have you we recently went to 5 Points Festival, which I believe was its 3rd year.
Yes.
Have you ever been to that show?
I did. I did the first one, and I'm hoping to do it this coming year. And I did Decon Designer Con last year, which is kind of in a way 5 Points is kind of the East Coast Decon. And yeah, those shows are awesome. I mean, I love comic conventions, but I do a lot of them. So if I get the chance to do a designer toy show, it's so much fun because the whole vibe has changed. I see things I've never seen before. I want to buy something from every damn table. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back to 5 Points as soon as possible.
As we talk to other creators in the past and writers and artists and whatnot, when we get to someone who's doing holding multiple titles on their own thing, do you ever how am I going to word this? Some of them get mad at themselves because they write a thing and then realize, oh, I have to draw this now. Versus other times where they get to say like, I feel like drawing this, so I'm going to write it into my book. So does that really benefit you? Or do you ever like want to re-edit what you're doing and be like, I'm not sure if this is going to transfer well to paper, so I'll just rewrite it because I can do that because I'm also the writer.
No, I never go back and like edit the things. Sometimes I'll write something that may be, a little bit more ambitious than I feel like drawing when I get to the page. Mm-hmm. So I'll simplify things in some ways here and there, but mostly, I mean, that's the fun of writing. If you're an artist and you write for yourself, that's the fun in it. Like if you're sitting there drawing and you're bored, well, it was your own damn fault. Like you wrote the thing, you got to draw it now. And so that's like, I never felt much like a writer or even still do, but me writing came from a place of, I want to draw these like comics that I thought would be fun to draw. And so I've always tried to draw things that would be fun to look at. And if it's fun to look at, it's fun to draw. So like it's great writing for yourself. you can kind of do whatever you want and make sure that you're going to have fun every day. Cause it's like a lot of hours of sitting at a drawing table.
I want to stick to the fun for a second because to pitch the book and to say like, well, Head Lopper is about this massive barbarian guy who swings swords and he chops people, so he lops their heads off and there's a lot of fighting and then to say like, but then once in a while something funny happens. Like when he's on, and I've got issue 4 volume 1 in front of me, and like he's on the boat, the ferryman's going to bring him across the river, and like the corpses are coming up to reach at him. He starts chopping at him, and then the ferryman is like, no, don't do that, they should earn your respect. And he's like, oh, I apologize. And like putting his skull back on his head, one of the corpses is like, no biggie. And so there's a lot of stuff like that, and how Agatha's like, she's real sassy too. And do you write for the jokes, or do you feel they insert themselves? And are there times where you feel like it's maybe out of place or it's needed? I'm not really a creator myself, but I wouldn't know the proper places for these.
Yeah, I try not to think. I try not to get too much in my own way about thinking what's too much or whatever. I've never considered it a comedy book or anything like that, or a funny book. And originally, even the jokes I put in there, I thought they were just kind of like, cracking myself up or whatever. So that's really the nature of it. Is if I'm writing something, and you're not writing or even drawing at the same pace that you're reading or experiencing something. So you have this time to think of, oh my God, it'd be funny if someone said so-and-so or whatever, or you come up with something just on the fly, and you've got this whole arc and you're not planning for jokes or anything, or not usually. And there's just some spot that just something pops in your head and you're like, it just I'll make myself laugh a little bit. And then I'm like, well, frig, I'll put it in there then. You know what I mean? But sometimes I look back at those jokes, I'm like, that wasn't necessary. But that's also like the fun of it, again, of being the writer and the artist, is like I just have that much control that if something cracks me up, I'm just like, well, I don't know, maybe it'll crack someone else up too. And I'll just stick it in there, you know.
Is there a certain? I feel like Head Lopper, and like I'm pretty stuck on this book, but he's a character that is. He seems, and this is again coming from someone with no artistic talent whatsoever, but he seems like a very fun character to draw, and that I see a lot of artists that I follow who I admire also drawing Head Lopper because he seems fun. Like he's just the barbarian, he's got the beard, he's got the sword, and it seems like, is it ever like a pat myself on the back type of moment when you see like, you've mentioned, Mike Mignola being such a fan, and like there's a pinup, like he has drawn your character, and like we're really big fans of Ryan Otley on our show, and like I remember when he did a cover for the book, that was the one I was like, okay, give me this one. I need that cover. James Herron has a pinup in the back of the first trade from Rumble, which we're gonna talk about that also. But like, is it ever like kind of surreal to see so many people, drawing your character?
Oh, absolutely. It's extremely surreal. When Mignola drew Head Lopper, I think I was doing maybe a Kickstarter at the time for the kind of my second self-published issue, and he hit me up on Facebook and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to do." It was his idea. He's like, "I'd love to do a pinup for this book." Although it was phrased a little bit like, "I know you're gonna want me to do this." I know you're not gonna say no. But yeah, I was floored. I literally like got up from my computer, took a lap around the living room, came back to the computer, and I was like, all right, it's still there. That message was real. But yeah, totally. I used to think to myself early on, before I really had made any comics or anything, I used to marvel at, people not unlike, Mignola for that matter, who have a character that's successful enough to go for many, many years. And I'm like, damn, I hope they really like drawing that character, because they're going to draw that same exact person so many times.
Mm-hmm.
They hope they're not bored, so it makes you ask that question, like, well, what would be a character that you wouldn't get bored drawing? And again, very early on, I was running this this kind of art blog, like themed art blog, where there's a bunch of different artists, and every week we would change our theme, and it didn't have to be comics related. It rotated alphabetically through the artists, and they would just every week would choose what everyone else would have to draw off of, and someone's theme was either Viking or metal, and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna draw something exciting. And I drew a very early version of what was Norgal, and that was the thing that made me want to draw it. Was when I finished drawing it, I was like, man, that was so much fun, like just drawing something as kind of Viking and as metal as possible. And I thought, and it struck me as like, oh, this is that feeling, having that much fun drawing something is the only way you can probably tolerate drawing a character for 20, 25 years or something like that. And so when I had a chance to draw a comic and self-publish it, I had like a month in my schedule at the time where like I could I had some freedom to just draw whatever I wanted. And I said like, oh, I'm going to pull up that character that I thought to myself would be fun to draw over and over and over and over again. And then that's kind of where I started, where with Head Lopper, the very, very beginning of Head Lopper, it was just starting with a character that I thought would be fun to draw repeatedly.
It's almost when you hear bands talk about their first hit and be like, okay, we're going to play this for the next 20 years, so we better like it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's a lot of bands where I feel like there's got to be songs that they've been playing for so long that they're just like, I want to play anything but this, but I can't play anything else. I have to play this one.
Rumble?
Yeah. I had mentioned it a moment ago because there was a pinup in the back of the first trade by James Herron, and it's one of those books that I feel like is massively underappreciated. Is Rumble, which I can't remember where I saw it, but when I first came over, Alex had mentioned it. He's like, there's gonna be a crossover.
And I think Brett found it before either of us did. And I happened to find it just at the shop and go, this looks interesting and new, and I'm looking for something interesting and new, so I picked that up. And as I was reviewing her Twitter, I see there's going to be a crossover between Head Lopper and Rumble, and that seems perfect.
Yeah, I've known. I think I first found James's work on like DeviantArt maybe in like, I don't know, 2012, 2013 or something. And I think he was an art student at the time, and it just I thought it was the most original, most exciting thing I had seen. And evidently, John Arcudi had found him at around that same time, because not too long after, John recruited him to work on the BPRD. And somewhere down the road, I became friendly with John as well. And so at a couple of times over the last couple of years, James or I or John and I would just kind of like casually talk about like, oh my God, wouldn't it be so much fun to do a crossover? And somehow we never really got our kind of like schedules in order or whatever. We never got our ducks in a row. But finally this year, John was just like, hey, like, let's make sure we do this. If James will come back and do some more drawing on it, we'll get him to do it. We'll keep it short so we can manage it. But I think we're all just like, yes, absolutely. Like something we've wanted to do for a minute. I mean, John is such a hero of mine. And so is James for that matter. And so it's again, one of the reasons I even wanted to make comics once I was an adult and be like, yeah, maybe I'll actually try doing this, was reading, the BPRD comics that, John was writing for Guy Davis at the time. And then to see this young, exciting artist that I loved show up on that book, and then later on down the road, get to do a crossover with one of my characters. It's like, I mean, you mentioned like, hey, is a moment like this, surreal? And this is certainly one of those surreal moments for sure,
With that, and I want to throw in another name in a second, because as like you're in the biz, this is part of your career now. Like, are you working to network, or do your friends happen naturally? Because at one point when I was looking up your name, it popped up on Comic Art Fans, and Joe Delgado's got a bunch of your work posted. I'm like, I love Joe's. I have a original page of it was an unpublished Holy Diver of a pirate ship, and I love pirate stuff. And I have a tattoo of one of his commissions. And I'm like, is Boston Joe friends with Andrew? Like, this is awesome. So,
yeah, Joe's one of my best friends. He, I think I originally found his artwork also on DeviantArt around the same time I found James's work. And again, being a huge Vanilla fan, and so is Joe, we kind of like bonded on that. And I'm from Massachusetts. He's from Massachusetts. So we would, I think we first met at like a Boston Con or something, but he's just like, he's one of the sweetest guys ever. He's really easy to like. So we've been good friends for quite a while. And yeah, I've given him, and we've traded all kinds of art. I've got a bunch of his art. We've done a few collaborations just for, for fun or whatever. But yeah, Joe's my dude for sure.
One thing that I did when we were doing a little prep and Alex was showing me the Comic Art Fans page, was he has an unused Head Lopper cover, which initially caught me a little bit by surprise, because and I could be wrong in this, so feel free to correct me. Head Lopper art doesn't routinely get sold, correct?
No, I got some advice really early on from a veteran that I really respected, and he was like, because I was selling or had Head Lopper stuff available for sale, and he was just like, you should just hang on to that. Two things. A, he was like, at the time nobody wanted it, and it was like dirt. I had my price tags on my art at the time were, I don't know, $50 a page or something, and nobody wanted it because no one read that was when I was self-publishing. And he said, he's like, hey, just hang on to it, because later on it might be worth more, and comic artists don't have retirement funds or whatever. So I kind of like took that to heart and just was like, yeah, I guess he's right. Like I should not let it all go. And I'm kind of glad he said that, just because he's right. Now I think of a lot of my original art as being like the fund for when the hot water heater breaks or something like that. So yeah, I sell them pretty sparingly, either to friends or people who I don't know, who knows. There's usually no rhyme or reason to it, but yeah, there isn't a whole lot out there.
It like adds that like layer of like mystique to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes it it's like Greg Capullo original sketches. Like, oh, I have a Greg Capullo sketch. Oh, do you? Because he doesn't sketch, dude. How did you get that? But like I remember it was in New York, I think a couple years ago. I think there was like a stack of originals, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm about to snag me some Head Lopper. And like I think you even had a sign that was like, hey, originals, no Head Lopper. Don't bother. It's like, I believe it was maybe like Apocalyptic Girl, some older, like I'm not quite sure what was in the stack, but I remember it was and it added that layer of like, well, why not? Now I need it. How much? It doesn't matter how much. Just give me a price. But I think that's rad. Again, like something that you create, that you spend like literal years of your life putting together. I can see, maybe being somewhat difficult to part with as time goes on.
Frankly, I'm not a really precious person, particularly with my art. I don't call a page done unless I feel at least pretty good about it. So it isn't to say that I don't like my work, but it's more, for me, it's not even so much emotional as it is just literally like, okay, there's not a lot of money in comics anyway. So unless I really need the money, try to save some of my art for art sales for a rainy day, and it could just totally backfire or whatever. But it's trying to strategize to like keep the a comic career afloat a little while longer if possible.
With the last, like, we have about 13 minutes or so left here. I did also want to talk about another kind of avenue that you have, because yes, there's the comics, there's the comic art and all that. We touched on design a little bit earlier in the episode. I did want to talk about your other line of Lazer Wolf Attack, which is, I don't know if you want to typically say it's just a clothing line. It's kind of like merchandise, patches, mostly clothing, things like that. What's the story behind Lazer Wolf Attack? How'd this come to be? Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, sure. So my wife and I, she had a handful of jobs. I'd had a handful of jobs before the art stuff. And it was just, we both didn't love them so much. And once I started, working for myself in getting some comics things off the ground, having the freedom to, run my own business was really nice. And to see my wife not enjoy some of the jobs she had and me, but also I really believed in her. And so I started to be like, man, like you would do really well to be self-employed, like you can, like maybe you should run a business as well. And so we looked into a handful of things, and a handful of businesses that we considered it would have been just astronomically expensive to get started. And around that time I had a drawing that I'd done that didn't end up having a home. So I was like, hey, like maybe we'll do a t-shirt of this drawing and just see. And just that, I didn't think anything of it. And it wasn't comics related or anything. And then people seemed to really like it. And so eventually we were like, maybe this business idea is to make t-shirts, and merchandise, is to make more of these types of things that aren't necessarily comics related. And so we started this company together that she runs, and its face is sometimes changing, because when we first started, we're like, oh, we want to do specifically t-shirts, and we want to do wholesale, but you do more research, you do a little bit of research, and you learn that, some things are either difficult or not as profits are harder to come by in certain avenues. So it has changed a lot. So we never, like, we started, we're like, we'll do t-shirts, but now we do, like you said, we do pins, patches, we do a lot of hats. We've done, we're always trying to find something else that's fun to make. And so part of it is my wife is just brilliant, and she's a great business partner, and we work on pretty much everything together. The other thing is I'm always trying to make something. So Lazer Wolf Tech has largely become this place to just make things. And when we have a new idea that's outside of maybe specifically Head Lopper or Apocalyptic Girl or something, the specifically comic stuff, we do it through our company, Lazer Wolf Tech.
I brought it up because, again, I'm not as familiar, and I'm having a hard time not chuckling at Strawberry Shitstorm. Just the name in general is like, I just want to have a good chuckle at that.
Go for it. That was the initial T-shirt that I had done. It was just a piece of art that I'd done, pretty much for fun, and even the name, like, it's raining like ice cream cones, and again, it's just fun things to look at or whatever. And I was just chuckling to myself, being like, a strawberry ice cream soft serve in a spiral just kind of looks like poop. So I don't know, somehow it came up with Strawberry Shitstorm or something. But yeah, that was largely the kind of genesis of all of the Lazer Wolf Tech stuff, which is now I think we just celebrated like our 3rd anniversary or something like that. It's gone by so fast.
That's really neat to hear, and it's also, like, for what it's worth, I've had the pleasure of talking with both you and your wife at previous conventions, and I was telling Alex about this a little bit beforehand, in that I struggle with talking to people, like, at shows. I'm very shy, especially when it's like, people I really like admire, like, I'm holding the book nervously. Hey, would you mind signing this? That kind of stuff. I struggle with that. I'm not very good at it.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I rely on Alex to kind of bridge those conversations, and I can butt in and act like a smart guy every now and then.
If there's someone I think maybe we can have on the show, and I'm trying to pitch next to him, and I go, we do a podcast. I'm Alex, and my partner's gone.
Yeah, because I wandered. Yeah, I tend to wander. I get very bashful, and it's something that's. But for what it's worth, you and your wife have always been very kind and approachable. I've never really struggled, like, or been like overly nervous or anxious or anything like that. You guys are really cool to talk to, and like, I've had like conversations with the both of you at shows before, and it's just really rad to be able to do that and not feel anxiety or nervousness or whatever. So excuse me for getting sappy, but for what it's worth, you're really good at shows. You and your wife are both great, and I appreciate that.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. I'm not unlike you. When I'm at conventions, especially if I'm like, on the fan side of the table, and I'm just walking around, being a fan, just checking stuff out, I feel really anxious too. So I know that I try to remember that when I'm just hanging out. But also, Erin's just really good at it. She's super chatty, and and I think she easily has really genuine conversations, and I just go, yeah, right, yeah, exactly. But yeah, well, that's great. I'm so glad because we really genuinely super enjoy it. We feel really lucky to be able to travel together and to make comics in general, and it's I'm so glad it comes across that way.
As far as what's coming up, we had mentioned New York Comic Con, and the fact that you had done, like, it's cool that you do like the kind of like local things, whether it's a local comic shop, something like that. Mm-hmm. As far as the future, can you tell us, like, what you have planned, like, as far as shows, because we know you're going to be in New York in a couple weeks. Oh my God, New York is very soon. What do you got coming up, as far as appearances and things like that go?
This year I was, for a while we were hitting the same shows for a couple years in a row, so we're trying to mix it up a little bit. We're still going to hit New York because New York's just so crazy and so great. So we will be at New York. This year we're doing MondoCon. I think that's maybe only a week away at this point. Doing Tucson, Comic-Con. I think there might be something in LA I'm doing. It gets really busy in September and October, and I can't keep them all straight. But we'll be doing Designer Con. That's in November. There's all kinds of stuff right around the corner. I'm gonna try to do on social media kind of maybe an updated list of what I've got coming up, because again, for some reason September and October just always gets super crazy for conventions.
How about as far as, you know, as we wrap up here, the future of Head Lopper? Do you see? Because initially, I remember when Head Lopper first came out, I was like, "Oh, there's only going to be 4 issues, and that's it." It's that's so sad, but it's turned into so much more than that. Very grateful as a fan. Is there an end in sight for Head Lopper? Is that something that you just plan on continuing as long as your hands are drawn?
I do have an end. I wouldn't say that it's like exactly in sight. it's quite a few volumes down the road. But now that I have, I don't know, 3 volumes, which is roughly, I don't know, 700 pages or something. The kind of the tip of the ship is moving more and more towards big story and everything. So I'm kind of like Norgal's journey is moving more and more towards the that final destination, but it's not anytime soon.
Excellent. That's good news for fans and readers alike. Now, Head Lopper Volume 3 is going to be in stores. That's September 18th of this year, 2019. So by the time this is up, it'll be probably just a couple days away, maybe a week or so away. So you have your opportunity to tell your local comic shop to order a copy if they haven't already, so you can snag that. Or if you're a procrastinator such as myself, you can most likely, I'm assuming, pick it up at New York Comic Con. And get your copy there. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute pleasure. It's, I don't know how else to say it. This was rad. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Like I said, September 18th, 2019, pick up Head Lopper Volume 3, or even future issues of Head Lopper. If your comic shop ain't stocking it, man, they're doing something wrong. But that's going to do it for this week. Once again, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. Until next time, I have been JR.
I'm Alex.
I'm Andrew MacLean.
And this has been, I almost said Andrew. This has been Andrew. Oh, Lord, it's a late night. This has been episode 389 of Opinions May Vary.